believe I said we'd finish with some comments about the end of Lyriel. I think we talked about the sendings come and they bring Lyriel an overcoat or surcoat, and they bring Sam one. Sam has the wallmaker's trowel, we're told, and he tells us, a couple pages into that chapter 44, 2 or 3 pages, he tells us the wallmakers have been gone for centuries, 1,000 years at least, okay? And when Lyriel sees his coat, she then beckons to the sending. She takes off her waistcoat, her vest, hands it to the sending, and takes the coat from the sending and says, we're told, on the coat were the golden stars of the clear, quartered with the silver keys of the abhorsen. And she says, I must be half abhorsen. In fact, I think I'm your mother's half-sister. Your grandfather was my father. I mean, I'm your aunt. Half-aunt, sorry. Sam's trying to think about, what all that means. He says, wait, does she know? I don't think so. Okay? Or she would have found me long ago. I only worked it out myself by using the dark mirror. I wanted to see who my father was. I looked back, saw my parents in this very room. My father was sitting in that chair. They had one night together before he had to go away. That was the year he died. Okay? So, the year he died, the year she was conceived was the year Sabriel came into her abhorsenship, for lack of a better word. The year she and Touchstone put down Caragor. Okay? Sam, can't have been. That's 20 years ago. Oh, she said, by the way, I lied to you. Remember earlier she told me she was 35, which she doesn't look. Sam, how did the sendings know to give you that surcoat? Maggid, I told them. How did you know? I've served the abhorsens for many centuries. I tend to know what's what. Once I realized Sam wasn't the abhorsen in waiting, he says, I kept my eyes open because the bells wouldn't have appeared unless her arrival was imminent. He says, and I was here when Lyriel's mother came. Okay? It was rather elementary. Lyriel was clearly both the former abhorsen's daughter and the abhorsen in waiting the bells were meant for. Sam, so I'm not Lyriel, but I can't be. I'm a Clare. I'm a remembrancer as well. I'm a daughter of the Clare. Maggid, complain all you want. That is, try to deny it all you want. But the blood will out. That, by the way, is a medieval saying. Blood will out. And what it means is murder. Well, in the medieval context, what it means is murder will out. If you secretly try to murder somebody, something is going to happen so that murder will be revealed. Okay? You're the abhorsen in waiting, you must take up the bill. Sam, thank the charter. Kind of like, C3PO. Thank the creator, he says, a couple of places. Okay? He goes, sorry, I just knew I was never going to be any good with him. You're being a much better abhorsen in waiting. What's he really mean? I don't have to go into death. I don't have to touch the bells. I don't have to read the book. None of which he has any desire for. Okay? What does he have a desire for? We're going to hear Maggid and the dog kind of talk about gifts. What is Sam's gift?
Creating things.
He's a creator or a maker. There's a reason why he has the wall maker's overcoat or surcoat. Okay? So, Lyriel says, she whispers, does the walker choose the path or the path the walker? I won't have the sight, will I? She was half clear, but it was clear. It was the abhorsen's blood that ran strongest in her veins. The dog says, no, but it is your clear heritage that gives you the gift of remembrance. For only a child of abhorsen and clear can look into the past. The dog earlier said, or Rael and Sanar. I can't remember which. One of them says, the last time there was a remembrance was when? It's over 500 years previously. So now we have an heir of the wall makers back after 1,000 years, and now we have a remembrancer back. Okay? You must grow in your own powers for yourself, for the kingdom, for the charter. And so she's, I will never have the sight. I will never have the sight. What's she doing? She's coming to grips with that reality. Why will she never have the sight? She was never meant to. Remember, what did she want more than anything at the beginning of the novel? She wanted to gain the sight. Why? She wants to fit in. She wants to fit in with how everybody else within the clear society fits in. What is she going to discover? A few remaining pages here and through all of Abhorsen. How does she fit in? She thinks fitting in is being part of the crowd, being one of the many. For her and for Sam, what is fitting in really? It's like a small piece in a very large puzzle. Without her, without Sam, the puzzle, the completion of the knowledge, doesn't get completed. Similarly, without the dog, without Mugget, without Sabriel, without Touchstone, they're each small pieces, okay? Kind of like, go back to Chronicles of Prydain, kind of like each of the individuals that kind of flits into Taryn's life, okay? They're all part of what that visualizes or images Taryn's life that he doesn't understand until nearly the last page of the book. The tapestry on the loom. What does Orthu explain to him when the three come to him the night before he makes his big decision? He looks at it and he comes to realize everything in there, it's all the product of what?
His choices.
The three things that the three makers taught him. Heaven says life is like a forge or an anvil. You beat it and shape it. Dwebec, the weaver, says life is like a loom. Why? You have to make the warp and woof of the fabric by the choices you make. Anwar the potter says life is like pottery. You shape your path. You shape your passage and such. Okay? She's got to learn that same thing. Sam asks, is the sight really that important to you? I mean, I feel amazingly relieved that I don't have to be that person in waiting. I never wanted the sense of death or to go into any death or any of it. And when I did that time in the necromancer, I wanted to die because then it would be over. Somehow I got out. I knew I couldn't ever go into death again. He says, it was just everyone else, notice, expecting me to follow in Mother's footsteps. Everyone else expecting him to what? To fit this preordained path. No. See, the thing of Does the walker choose the path or the path the walker? That doesn't only refer to ab horses. Sam has his path to walk, right? Or does he choose his own path? Yes, to both. He goes on. You know, all the other Claire have the sight, so that's the only thing that matters, even if you don't want it. It would be the only way to meet their expectations, like me being the ab horse in waiting. Only I didn't want to be what they wanted, and you did. You wanted to be. Is it that the Claire wanted her to be that way? No. How do we know that the Claire did not want her to have the sight? She was never seen. Okay? So, the Claire want Lyriel to be what? Whatever she's supposed to be. Morgan, wow, 100 words in a row. Hope for you. He says, you're right. Lyriel is so obviously an ab person that wanting the sight must be solely a peculiarity of her upbringing. Lyriel, I wanted to belong. In a way she'd known ever since she'd been blindfolded before being allowed into the observatory, or perhaps since St. and Rael had waved her farewell. She had known her life would change, that she would never have the sight, never be truly one of the Claire. Mogget says to her, you belong here. This is where you fit. I am the oldest servant of the Abhorsons. I feel it in my very marrow. The Sindings likewise. Look at the way they cluster there, just to see you. Look at the charter lights that burn brighter above you than anywhere else. Now, is this every place they go, the charter lights, when there are charter lights, they kind of hover around Lyriel? Not necessarily. But here, Abhorson's house, yes. This whole house and its servants welcome you, Lyriel. So will the Abhorson and the king and even your niece. She looks around. Great throng of Sindings clustered around the door of the kitchen. They're looking in at her. The dog, Mogget, is correct. Your blood has made you what you are. But you should remember, it's not just the high office of the Abhorson in waiting you have gained. You found a family. What was one of the things she lacked back with the Claire? She had family though, right? She has her aunt, Kirith. She has her great-great-grandmother, which she doesn't know until seemingly the day the great-great-grandmother dies, when she says, I should have seen you earlier. By the way, I am your great-great-grandmother. Okay? It's a family you have found. And what is family? Well, let me rephrase that. What should family be more than anything else? Or let me rephrase that. More than anybody else. Family is where you should be what? Welcomed and totally accepted. See, she's not totally accepted among the Claire because she's an oddball. Here, she'll be totally accepted. Okay? So, they've got to decide what they're going to do. What does Sam want? Let's stop for a while. Let's recharge, rest. And she's like, no, we've got to go. We just fought off Clore of the Mask. Another book that follows the three. Trying to remember the title. I don't think it's Clarion.
Golden Hand.
Might be Golden Hand. Or it might Golden Hand and then Clarion. One of those, I won't say which, gives us the backstory of Clore of the Mask. Okay? Anyways, Lyriel thinks she's Abhorson in waiting. That's her job now. She's got to do it properly. Notice, same way that she thought about her job as third assistant librarian. She has this this work ethic that says, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it well, etc. She would not fail in the future as she had failed the Sutherlings on the banks of the Radical. Okay? So, Sam had said, I was thinking of staying here. Lyriel says, you can't. Okay? How is she saying that? Is this woman he's just met, a few days ago? No. She's saying that as Abhorsen in waiting. And his aunt. A little bit of authority, even though she's only 2 years older. Think about what Hedge is trying to do. He's planning to kill 200,000 people, unleash every spirit in death upon the kingdom. Whatever he's thinking up must be part of that. I can't even begin to face it all alone, Sam. I need your help. The kingdom needs your help. You may not be the Abhorsen in waiting anymore, but you're still a prince of the kingdom. That is, you still have responsibilities. Sam, I'm afraid of death. And notice, sobbing. I'm afraid of Hedge. I can't face him again. She says, so am I. And 1,000 other things. The dog. Good. Here. It's always better to be doing, Prince. Okay? In the Old English poem Beowulf, after Beowulf kills the first monster, Grendel, Grendel's mother comes and kills another person of the Danish kingdom. And the person she kills is the right-hand man of the aged king Hrothgar. And Beowulf comes in the next morning, and Hrothgar starts moaning and bitching about his best friend being dead. And Beowulf says, essentially, it's better to act than to overmourn too much. In other words, get up and let's go do something. Okay? It's always better to be doing rather than, Sam said, I thought we would stay here. Stay implies what? Rest. Okay? Besides, you don't smell like a coward. Lyriel, you didn't hide from the crossbowmen at High Bridge or the construct when it came across the water. That was brave. And I'm sure that whatever we face won't be as bad as you think. Little does she know. Okay? Mogget, it'll probably be worse. So then we read about, we read the letter that Nick writes to Sam. And Nick faints, and just before he faints, Nick had indeed fainted, and there was something else behind his eyes, some other intelligence that had lain dormant. It suddenly sang now, accompanied by fumes of acrid white smoke that coiled out of Nick's nose and throat. I'll sing you a song of the long ago, 7 shine the shiners oh. What did the 7 do way back when? Why, they wove the charter then. 5 for the warp. So notice, the charter is woven. 5 for the warp from beginning to end. 2 for the woof to make and mend. That's the 7. So 5, we know what? They go into the actual charter. Okay? 2 don't go into the actual charter, but they're involved in the making of the charter. The way the dog is going to put it later is that the 7 agree to make the charter, okay? 2 don't. So that's the 7, but what of the 9? What of the 2 who chose not to shine? The 8 did hide all away. But the 7 caught him, notice him, and made him pay. The 9th was strong and fought with might, but lone Oranus was put out of the light, broken in 2 and buried under hill, forever to lie there, wishing us ill. Okay? 7 what? 7 great beings before the creation of everything. According to what the dog has already told Lyriel, and what we're going to hear more later on. Who are these beings? We know their names.
They're the beings that the bells are named
They're the beings that the bells are named after. But we've got the 5, and then the 2, but we don't have the names for the last 2, except for Uranus, number 9. The one that is bound, separated. We don't have the name, however, for number 8. But we know who it is, right? That's Magen. Okay? Who are 6 and 7? We find that out early in the next book. Well, one of them we actually find out earlier. That's the dog. What's the dog's name? How do you know?
When she makes the archer walk.
When she makes the archer walk with her howl. And the howl kind of sounds similar to the bell. And Lyriel asks, what did you do? I made him walk. Okay? We're going to try to get through part 1 of this. We're going to see in part 1 when they make their way down to the well and they meet number 7, who is Astarael. Okay. What does the dog do? The dog says, flee. And Sam and Lyriel run. And notice they have no control over their legs. The dog has made them walk really, really, really fast. Okay? What is Astarael? Yeah, that's the final bell. That's the one, you hear it, and you go off into death. Okay, so death, walker, 1 through 5, we can talk about a little later. Okay, so we'll go from there to here. We get the prologue, and what happens in the prologue? Kind of interesting that he puts that action in the prologue, because prologue is kind of, the before word, the part that's not really important. You don't need to read it necessarily. If you think, for example, of the prologue that Tolkien wrote to the second, I think it was only in the second edition of The Lord of the Rings. I'll have to check that. Might be in the first edition. Anyways, the prologue's all about hobbits and stuff and how the rings were made. Okay? But you don't have to read it in order to understand The Lord of the Rings. What would happen if you didn't read this prologue?
You really lost a bit later.
You'd be very, very lost when we get to the interlude between part 1 and part 2. Okay? Why else is the prologue important? Not only the attack, the attempted assassination. What did we just learn about Lyriel at the end of Lyriel?
That she's Sabriel's sister.
And
The
Abhorsen in waiting, and then we see, look at how the prologue ends. The real shock came from the realization it was 300 years since a king and a queen had been slain on the streets of Corvera. Now it had happened again, and they had done the deed. What does that imply? Notice, it doesn't state explicitly or overtly.
The Sabriel and Touchstone are dead.
It implies that they're dead. But it doesn't name the king and queen. It just says a king and queen. We don't know who the king and queen who were killed 300 years ago were. Okay? They wouldn't have been, however, the Old Kingdom king and queen, because the royal family went on until Touchstone's mother, was queen, and that was 200 years ago. So, We open with chapter 1. They're still they, Sam, Lyriel, Dog, Mogget, are still in the house. Okay? We get a description of the house, well, kind of briefly. How the house is situated in the middle of the river. A little bit of, refreshing about the Abhorsen, how they, bind the dead and such. And a little bit of, background, how Sam was meant to be Abhorsen and such, but he found out that he's not. I want to pick up with paragraph that begins. Prince Sameth was meant to be the Abhorsen in waiting. This is 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 pages in. In your books, it's probably more like 3 pages in because your pages are larger. We're told Sam's thinking about Chlor and stuff, and he had not fought like an Abhorsen. Even the way he cast his charter magic was strange, reminiscent of neither the royal line nor the Abhorsens. Well, he is in the royal line. He's next in line to be king. Okay? But the magic that he cast wasn't like the king's, the magic that the royal line uses. Nor is it like the magic that the Abhorsens use. But notice, the narrator uses the term reminiscent. Reminiscent means what? Reminding of, remembering of, something that draws a connection or a link to. So, the narrator is telling us his magic is connected to something. It does draw a link or comparison, or it does remind one of another kind of charter magic. It's just not the charter magic of the Abhorsens or the royal line, which, notice, by the way, those are 2 parts of the charter. Sameth and Lyriel were not alone. They were supported by 2 creatures who appeared to be no more than a small, bad-tempered white cat and a large black and tan dog. Most likely, they were free magic spirits of some kind, bound in service to the Abhorsen and the Clare. Talk about the cat, and then we hear the dog was a different matter. She was new, or so old that any book that told of her was long since dust. The creature in the fog, who is that? Chlor, thought the latter. Chlor thinks, whatever this dog is, it's not a dog. And that thing's really old. Okay? Chlor, by the way, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've read Golden Hand and Clariel. Chlor is from about 500 years in the past. Okay? So, Chlor's thinking about all this, and we shift to the house. And they're thinking, what can we do? How do we get out of here? We got to go off. We got to find the red leg. Lyriel, has to meet with Nick in the boat on the lake, The dead come. They're not at the house yet, but they're at the, shore of the river. Paragraph that begins, no one commented on the shiver. Though Lyriel felt embarrassed at how obvious it had been. Okay? She can feel the presence of the dead. She feels the fog is evil. And she shivers. Middle of that paragraph. She was the Abhorsen in waiting now. While Savriel was across the wall in Ancelstier, she was the only Abhorsen. The dead, the fog, the chlor were her problems. Notice, Sam's kind of going, not mine. And they were only minor problems. Okay, and what are we told? There's at least 200 dead out there. Minor problem, like a hangnail. Hedge and Nick and what they're doing at the Red Lake. That's the big problem. Lyriel, I'll have to pretend. I'll have to act like an abhorsen. Maybe if I act well enough, I'll come to believe it myself. Why hasn't she come to believe it yet? How much time has passed from this scene from the end of the previous book?
Maybe an hour.
Yeah, is it maybe an hour? Is it maybe a day? I don't think it's a day. Okay. So why does she have to act? Later on, not too many more pages. I can't remember where it is. I've got it marked. She thinks, not only, do I have to put on this act, she's got to be strong. Why? Because if she's not strong, Sam will be strong. And she has to be strong to encourage him. Okay? So, she asked, is there another way out? Sam doesn't know. Mogget, cat's asleep. But he wakes up. Sabriel took the paper wing, can't fly out. Even if we could fly out, gore crows. And we already know they attack paper wings, right? Okay, so we can't fly out. They can't take the stepping stones to the land on either side because of dead. Dog, might be another way. Mogget, what way? Notice before Mogget says that, the dog says, though Mogget won't like it. There is no other way. Again, how long has Mogget served the abhorsens? From the first abhorsen on. Okay? Over 1,800 years, we were told. Well, over 1,800 years when Sabriel came into her abhorsenship, so now it's like 1,820. I've been here since the house was built. Yeah, the dog says, but not when the river was split and the island made. That is, you weren't here then, before the wall makers raised the walls. Who are the wall makers? That's part of this. Yeah, but neither were you. Notice, there was the hint of a question or doubt in Mogget's last words, thought Lyriel. Lyriel thinks when Mogget says neither were you, it was more like, yeah, but neither were you? Notice the intonation change? In any case, the dog says, there was once another way, if it still exists. Some might say it would be safer to cross the stones and fight our way through the dead. But not you? Okay, so they keep talking. The dog talks about the well. Deep? Does that mean what I think it does? We can't go there. She's long gone. Something might linger. Lyriel and Sam. She? She who? Is this like Shelob, Lord of the Rings? You know the well in the rose garden? It's possible to climb down the well. Sam, it's full of water. Dog, are you sure? No. Who's the she you mentioned? Lyriel asks. Someone who once lived down there. Someone who had considerable and dangerous powers. There might be some remnant left. What do you mean, someone? Mogget, not going. Nope, not going. Lyriel's gaze flicked across to Sam for an instant, then back to Mogget. She regretted it instantly. Why? It showed her own doubts and fears. Now that she was, this passage I was alluding to before, now that she was abhorsen waiting, she had to set an example. She can't show weakness. Okay? So she orders the dog to answer plainly or who or what is down there. Difficult to put into words. Why? Why is it difficult to put into words? Because it's talking about something that existed before words. Okay? If there is, I suppose you would call her a leftover from the, if someone is down there, you would call her a leftover from the creation of the charter, as am I. Okay? But notice, the dog didn't go into the charter. 5 great beings sacrificed themselves to become the charter. All right? 2 assisted. 1 refused to have anything to do with it. That one was bound. Mogget, wherever he is. Okay? And 1 tried to oppose them. Uranus. And so many others of varying stature. But if she is there, or some part of her, then it's possible she is as she was, which is dangerous in a very elemental way. What's he mean by elemental? Why is it italicized? And why are there dots on either side? Well, the dots indicate pausing. Why? When he pauses before saying elemental, I think because the dog is trying to find a word that describes Estoril. Okay? And then he finds it and then pauses again before saying the rest. It's also long ago, really, I'm only telling you what other people have said or written or thought. Why would she be down there? Why under Abhorson's house? Dog, she's not exactly anywhere. Maybe reading into it. What's a better way of putting what the dog just said?
She's kind of everywhere.
Bingo. She's not anywhere, meaning here, she's part of her power is invested here. So if she were to be anywhere, it's likely to be here. And that's where, if she were anywhere, she'd be. So let's not talk about it because it's too confusing. Okay? Mogget sleeps. Sam, I think he only listens to Rana when he feels like it. Okay? And the dog, Sam mentions Caragor, and the dog talks about Caragor. And talks about where Caragor got his powers. It came from his followers. Lyria, what do you mean? I thought he was a free magic sorcerer who became one of the greater dead. He goes, no, he was more than that. He had the royal blood. Because he had the royal blood, he had what? He had part of the charter in him. Okay? Somewhere in death, Caragor found the means to use the strength of those who swore allegiance to him through the brand he burned upon their flesh. If Sabriel had not accidentally used a most ancient charm that severed him from his power, I think Caragor would have triumphed, for a time at least. Sam, why only for a time? See, they thought by defeating Caragor, they defeated evil, so to speak. I think he would eventually have done what your friend Nicholas is doing now, and dug up something best left alone. Why? Why does he think Caragor would have done that? What's the source of evil? It's this. It's Uranus. Everything else, a shadow, an image. Okay? They get ready to go down, and Lyriel thinks, well, you know, maybe if she's still down there, maybe she'll be friendly. Maybe we can talk. Dog, no. But if she is there, which is very unlikely, you mustn't speak to her. You must not listen to her or touch her in any way. Has anyone listened or touched her? Mogget, you notice, not asleep. No mortal, nor pass through her halls, I would guess. Kind of like Paths of the Dead, you know, in the Lord of the Rings. It is madness to try. I always wondered what happened to Kaliel. Mogget, it's not her ill will I'm afraid of. I fear her paying us any attention at all. Why? Notice, it's not ill will. It's not that Estoril, as we find her name out later, it's not that Estoril is evil. Asterael is just what? Death. Okay? An elemental being, so to speak. Okay? So Sam says, perhaps we should, Mogget, stay here nice and safe. Sam, no. I mean, if her voice is so dangerous, maybe we should make earplugs before we go. Out of wax or something. Where does Nix get that idea? It's from the Odyssey by Homer. Odysseus, before they sail by Scylla and Charybdis, they have to go by the island of, or the waters of the Sirens. And Odysseus has been warned, it's death to hear the song of the Sirens. So, he has, or it'll drive you insane, let me put it that way. That's not death. He has all of his men stuff their ears with wax, with wax from a honeycomb, okay? While they lash him to the mast of the ship. He's going to hear it, because he's Odysseus. He can take it, kind of a thing. So they go through, and he hears the siren call, etc. But because his men don't hear it, they're able to safely navigate. That's where he gets the image from. Mogget, it wouldn't help. If she speaks, you will hear her through your very bones. That is, death isn't a mere auditory experience. We had best hope she will not sing. Dog, we'll avoid her. We will find our path. Does the walker choose the path, or does the path choose the walker? Sam, who is Kaliel? And, they talk about him for a bit. Lyrio, we find out Chlor is getting closer, and Lyrio notices Sam's wrists, the cuts that he suffered from Chlor. But she also notices his coat again, a surcoat that quartered the royal towers with a device that had not been seen for millennia, the trowel of the watchmakers. She's trying to figure out why. Okay? The surcoat, notice, we're told, is not old. It's not an heirloom. It's not a relic of a previous wallmaker that they pulled out of mothballs. It was new made. So he probably was entitled to wear it for some reason. He was a wallmaker as well as a royal prince. Notice, she's a Clare as well as an Abhorsen. He's a wallmaker as well as a prince. So we start to get this mixing of the charter elements. But what did that mean? The wallmakers had disappeared millennia ago, putting themselves into the creation of the wall and the great charter stones. And so she wonders, what's Sam's destiny? See, her destiny is never to be a seer. She will see, though, right? It'll be a different kind of seeing. She'll see the past. But she'll also go into death, which is kind of like going into the future. Would he have to make something that would end his life? At least as a living, breathing man? What does that mean, at least as? If it ends his life, what else is there?
Because the wallmakers kind of made themselves into the wall of the charter stone.
They put their essence, defined how, because they're not physical beings, right? These things weren't physical, they're spiritual. They were immaterial, okay? They made the matter and all that kind of stuff. At least as a living, breathing man, for the wallmakers weren't exactly dead, Sam thought. Remembering the great, Sam's thinking this, remembering the great charter stones and the wall. They were more transformed or transfigured, changed across. Okay? They became, in one sense, more than what they were. Do you remember previous book? We talked about the passage where Liriel is thinking of the dog. If I can find it real quick. Probably can't. And she thinks how one of the greater beings dog did what to become her friend? And we'll find it. Condescended to become her friend. Okay? Changed shape, form, took on this shape, form. Okay? So this is kind of the same kind of condescension. These, not all powerful, but the most powerful of the whatever these beings are before creation of everything, they do what? They sacrifice themselves to become part of these constructs. What are the constructs? The royal line, the Abhorsen line, the Clare line, the wall, and the charter stones. They put themselves into these things. They lower themselves, or to think of Sam's term, they transform or transfigure. Usually when you think of transformation, that's what? Do you transform to something lesser? No. For example, the Eastern idea of reincarnation. The idea is you get reincarnated into a higher being, unless you screw up. And then karma, you go from a human to a slug, and you have to start the process all over again. Sam thinks of all this. He had never wanted to be an Abhorsen. A wall maker was much more interesting, even if he didn't know what it meant to be one. Why is it more interesting? Sam likes to make stuff, right? First time we see him, he's up there in his workshop, in the castle. Okay? What does he make that both the dog and Margaret are kind of going like, that's pretty cool. He makes that little mechanical thing for his mother. Why? Because he says, she's often in swamps and fetid water. There's mosquitoes all over. And it goes out there and kills them all. Okay? And the dog's kind of like, you made that. You came up with it all on your own. You didn't have plans that you got from the old kingdom internet kind of thing. No. So they go down into the well. But before they do, Liriel's not content with totally giving up on her Clare past. And she takes a thread from her library waistcoat. And she pulls out this strand of red silk, winds it around her little finger several times to make a ring, ties it off, and then takes it and sticks it into the pouch where she keeps the dark mirror. She might not wear the waistcoat any longer, but part of it would always travel with her. This is almost like a relic. It's going to be important later on, right? And then she takes up the bells. Notice, who has had the bells up until this point? Sam has. Ownership is now transferred. And She reaches into the little bag that holds each bell. She makes sure not to ring any of them, but she's just, touching them. Smallest bell was Rana, the sleeper. Second bell, Masrael, the waker. Third bell, Kibeth, the walker. It granted freedom of movement to the dead. Fourth bell, Dairon, the speaker. It could return the power of speech to the long silent dead. Bel Geir was the name of the fifth bell, the thinker. It could mend the erosion of mind that often occurred in death, restoring the thoughts and memory of the dead. Sixth bell, Saranath, also known as binder, favorite bell of Abhorsens. Why? So you can bind the dead and, send them on their way. Asterael, the sorrowful, the bell that sent all who heard it into death. So Asterael isn't necessarily death itself, but it's the death process, dying. Okay. Sam sends a telegram off to his parents. They start going down the ladder. I'm skipping about, how they get the lid open and everything. They get the lid off, and we're told, this is 3 or 4 pages before the end of the chapter. Paragraph that begins, Liriel had expected a wet, dank smell to come up from the open well. There was a smell, strong enough to overcome the scent of the roses, but it wasn't of old standing water. Why roses? Because there's roses. It's a rose garden that the well is in. Okay? It was a pleasant herbal odor that she can't immediately identify. Dog. She asked the dog, what is that? What can I smell? Dog, very little. Little pun there, since dogs smell so much more. She goes, no. It's a plant, herb. Sam, I've used it in cooking. Dog, rosemary. And amaranth too. Okay? Rosemary. Interestingly, in some fiction, rosemary is an herb that is used to ward off the dead. Okay? We're not reading them. I'm trying to remember. Jonathan Stroud, the Bartimaeus author, in his Lockwood series, okay, that deal with ghosts coming around in London area. People plant rosemary in window boxes, and they put them out in front of the windows, and they put them in boxes over the doors. Anywhere where there's a possible entrance into a home, they've got rosemary growing. Why? Because it keeps death, it keeps ghosts and goblins and such away. So Nix is playing on that same idea. And amaranth. I didn't know if amaranth was real or not. So this morning, 5 o'clock, I Google, DuckDuckGo, since I don't use Google, amaranth. There's like 75 different species of amaranth. It's a weed, okay? But it's used for a wide variety of things. It's used as an herb. People make flour out of it. All kinds of stuff, okay? Though you probably cannot smell it, that is the amaranth. Maggid says, fidelity in love with the flower that never fades. And you still say she is not here. Amaranth means, according to Maggid, fidelity in love. Ama, probably from amo, Latin, love, okay, with the flower that never fades. What does Maggid mean? We wouldn't be smelling that if she wasn't still down there. Old smells, old spells. The scent is already fading. In other words, no, it's just because we removed the top and the smell was down here and it's fading out. Nothing to worry about. Okay? So they go down the ladder. Chapter 3, Amaranth, Rosemary, and Tears. Notice it goes down a long way. A couple pages in. Dog says, faster the better. That is, we need to get going. Lyriel says, we guess we have to go on. Dog, faster the better. We do not want to tarry anywhere under here. Lyriel nodded. She took one step forward, then hesitated, and drew her sword. Charter marks burned brightly on the blade as it came free of the scabbard, and the name of the sword rippled down the steel, briefly changing into the inscription Lyriel had seen before. Or was it different? She couldn't remember. And the words rippled away too quickly for her to be sure. These are the words it said. The Claire saw a sword, and so I was. Remember the wall makers. Well, she has one right next to her. Kind of. Remember me. The name of the sword? Mihima, right? Which means, we were told earlier, forget me not. Also the name of a flower, by the way. Which also means remember. Okay? Dog. Couple paragraphs later, 3 paragraphs later, we gotta go. We must hurry. There's an anxiety in the dog's voice that Lyriel picks up on. Suddenly, a couple pages on from there, paragraph that begins, the tunnel was significantly wider than the previous one. Middle of the paragraph, she realizes she's getting colder. Well, that would make sense. Okay? If you've ever gone into a cave, I've not gone into any cave more than at a beach, more than about 10, maybe 20 feet where you can still see the bright big opening. But I've known people who around here have gone into all kinds of caves because, there's caves all over Middle Tennessee and have gone, quite a ways in. Actually, I have been in a much larger cave, the great big one over in McVinville, where you can go in miles. She had a strange sensation around her feet and ankles, almost as if there were something rushing around her heels. A current that swished one way and then the other, but there was no water there. Now, what should immediately go through her mind? If she feels something like a current, even though there's no water, and it's around her feet, what is that reminiscent of?
Death.
Why?
Because it has the river.
Death has the river of water that flows through it. Various height levels. When you first go in, it's like knee and ankle. Later on, it gets up to your hips. It can get up to your chest. What you don't want to do is go under. Okay? Or was there? That is, there's no water, or was there? She sees stone when she looks at it how? Straight on. But over here, there is water. Dark water coming from behind them, pushing past, and then curling back. A wave that's trying to knock them down and sweep them back the way they came before. It reminded her of the river of death. And all of her senses tell her she's alive, but... And then she smells rosemary again, with something sweeter. That's the amaranth. And at that moment, the bells start to shake. Okay, who has the pipes? Because they don't just leave the pipes there. Sam has the pipes. And she says the bells, they're shaking. And Sam says the pipes. And the pipes all make their whistling sound. Mogget, no. The dog, run. And they've got the charter light above them, and it goes out. Why does it go out? A couple paragraphs later, all the golden charter light was gone, and it was dark. the total darkness of deep earth. Couple more paragraphs. The charter was gone, or she could not reach it. And then she sees the barest fingernail scraping of illumination, spark and fizz. Like you cut your finger, you trim your fingernails, and there's that much little bit of light. And it just, okay? Maggid has what? He's been unbound. How? Who unbound him? Can it have been Asterael? I'm asking seriously. We're not told that Liriel does it. We're not told that Sam does it. We're not told that the dog does it. Maggid can't unbind himself. Okay? He's bound by the makers of the charter. The dog stood between the pool of white fur and Liriel, but it was not the dog as Liriel knew her. She still had a dog shape, but the color of charter marks was gone. She was a creature of intense darkness outlined with silver fire. Why outlined with silver fire? Because of the white of Maggid's unbound form on the other side. So the dog is like a silhouette. She is here, boomed a voice. It was the dog's and yet not the dog's. The Maggid is free, run. Okay? But something is even brighter than, so you've got the dog, you've got the Maggid, and then an even brighter light shone. Something so bright that Lyria realized she had shut her eyes and was seeing it through her eyelids. Eyelids seared through with the image of a woman, an impossibly tall woman, head bowed even in this high tunnel, reaching out her arms to sweep them all up. Okay? River flows around in front of the shining woman. This was the river of death, and this creature was bringing it to them. And that's when the dog shouts, flee, and they start to run. Notice, what does Asterael do? It's the sorrowful, and it sends one into death. Here, it's bringing death to them. Okay? So they escape, and Sam says, whatever that was, back where we were, the charter wasn't. Why?
The charter's part of life.
Okay. What else? What do you mean the charter's part of life?
That's what all of life was like kind of made from.
The charter is part of everything that's made. All existence. Okay? In that sense. Physical existence of a sort. Okay? Where Asterael was, there is no charter. Why? Because Asterael was never in the charter, was never part of the charter. Remember? Sorry about that. 6 and 7. They agreed to help make the charter, but they didn't put themselves into the charter, which is why the dog can do all kinds of stuff. The dog isn't bound by the charter. Maggid can't. He wears the enslavement, the collar. Okay? Asterael is also totally, completely outside the charter. It's like death, think Bartimaeus, is the other place. Okay? And I don't know if you finished this book yet, but we're going to get this beautiful, I think it's just a stunningly beautiful image. When we see somebody sent finally beyond the 9th gate. And what to experience full death, to no longer be, as Miracle Max calls it, mostly dead, but to be totally dead, really entails. And the person who sees it, it's like a relief for that individual. Okay? Liriel thinks we have to go back. We can't leave the dog. The dog says you don't need to go back. It's me. Okay? Sam asks, where's Margaret? She wished to, not getting nearly as far as I wanted to. She wished to speak to him. I was wrong. I put you in terrible danger. What do you mean? What happened to the charter? It was her coming. It is her fate that her knowing self will be forever outside what she chose to make. The charter that her unknowing self is part of. What is the unknowing self of Asterael? Okay, it's the part that Asterael doesn't. Let me back up. Her knowing self will be forever outside what she chose. What does that mean? Her knowing self. Conscious self? Aware self? So if that's the case, then what is her unknowing self? Subconscious, right? Because you're not aware of your subconscious. It's the part of you you don't know. What's the part of Asterael that Asterael doesn't know? I think it's this. It's death. Death has been put into the charter. See, where Asterael is beyond death, it's beyond the charter. Where Asterael is, it's eternal. Because death is eternal. Death is within time. So, she stayed her hand when she could so easily have taken you to her embrace. I don't know why or what it may mean. Okay? He says, her knowing self will be forever outside what she chose to make. Her knowing self, it's implied, chose not to take Sam and Liriel. I believed her to be past any interest in the things of this world, and so I thought to pass her unscathed. When ancient forces stir, many things are woken. What are the ancient forces stirring? Uranus. Okay? Forgive me. Liriel had never seen the dog so humbled. Sam, but what happens to Margaret? Notice, who should be more concerned about Margaret? Because she's Abhorsen in waiting, and Margaret is the servant of the Abhorsen. He was unbound. He'll try to kill the Abhorsen. Mother, Liriel. We don't have the ring to bind him. Margaret has long avoided her. I don't think we need to worry about Margaret anymore. How could he not be coming back? Wait. Sam says, wait. He's powerful, free magic spirit. Liriel. Who is she? She hasn't, the dog hasn't explained that yet. It won't help you to know because you can't understand. She doesn't really exist anymore, except every now and then and here and there in small ways and small things. If we had not come this way, she would not have been. What? Not Heidegger. Who am I thinking? No. I think it's Ludwig Wittgenstein. And the physicist who came up with the notion that when we observe something, it's in the it's in the idea of the Schrodinger's cat thing. When we observe something, we change that thing. It's the idea that there can be no real, true objectivity. Because every time we observe something, we impact that thing. And the idea behind, I think it's something like this. I can't remember how you spell it. Schrodinger's cat. Okay? You have a box, you put a cat in it. Does the cat exist in the box? Okay? No. The cat only, theoretically, cat only exists in the box when you look to see what's in the box. If you don't look in the box, how do you know that the cat is there? It's the idea behind quantum physics. Things exist or don't exist depending upon if they are observed. You know, the old philosophical question. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there, does it make a sound? Well, what are sounds? They're waves, right? There has to be what? There have to be receptors in order for it to be sound. So, if I go off, you know, every sound wave, the wave continues. But if there's not a receiver out there, what is it? It's just a wave. It doesn't get translated into hearing sound unless there's an observer. Notice what the dog is saying. She wouldn't have been there, what? If we didn't go. The only reason she was there is because we went. We made her exist, in essence. Okay? Liriel, tell me, in other words, cut the shit. Tell me the truth. You know who she is, at least in some degree. She tapped her nose against Liriel's bell bandolier, leaving a wet mark on the leather of the seventh bell. That's who she is. And a single slow tear rolled down her snout. Why a tear? The sorrowful. Astariel. Notice, Sam says, not Liriel. The weeper? What are you then? The dog looked up at her, because this is Liriel now. I am the disreputable dog, a true servant of the charter. Notice, the dog didn't condescend himself into the charter, didn't sacrifice whatever its being is to become part of the charter, but calls itself a true servant of the charter. Is Mogget a true servant of the charter? No. Servant implies free will, choice. Mogget's a slave of the charter. Okay? So, dog says, always your friend. So Liriel says, all right, they need to be going on if Mogget's not coming back. Sam, I suppose so, though I feel sort of strange. I kind of got used to Mogget. Now he's just gone. I mean, has she killed him? No. Notice, exclamation. It's loud. No. No exclamation. What? It's not for us to know. Our task lies ahead. Mogget lies behind us. You're sure he won't come for Mother or Liriel? I'm sure your mother is safe from Mogget across the wall. And notice, only half answering Sam's question. Okay. So they come out, they find out it's the same day, only an hour has passed, even though it seems like a lot more than that. Liriel says, we got to get moving, a couple pages in, I feel time slipping away. And they stop to camp, and Sam pulls out his sewing kit. He's going to fix the backpack that he carried Mogget in, because Mogget tore itself out. And Liriel says, I'm glad you can think of Patches. I can't help thinking of what happened today. The bells trying to sound, the white lady, Astrael, presence of death. Sam, you know, ever since I found out you were abhorsing and waiting, I haven't felt afraid. I mean, I've been scared, but not the same. Why? I'm not responsible now. I am responsible because I'm a prince of the kingdom, but it's normal things I'm responsible for, not necromancers, death, you know. And he says, and the Sendings gave me this surcoat with the trowel. They gave it to me, and I've been thinking, it's as if my ancestors are saying, it's all right to make things. But what does Sam mean or think the making things means? I mean, I'm a woodworker. I like to build, you know, bookcases and stuff. Is Sam thinking, oh, that's cool. I can just go off my little workshop and piddle around? That's what I'm meant to do. Make things and help the abhorsen and the king. So I'll do that, and I'll do my best. And if my best isn't good enough, at least I will have done everything I could, everything that is in me. I don't have to try to be someone else, someone I could never be. And where's Sam, metaphorically now? He's where Liriel was when she discovered she's now abhorsen and training. She doesn't have to try to be what she wasn't born to be, a Claire with the sight. Okay? So they go to sleep. The dog watches. They make their way to the steps. They go up them. They realize there's a lot of dead at the top of the steps. And Liriel sees the man who had been the boy, teenager, that we see on her 14th birthday when she goes down to the lower refectory, and he kind of, comes up and kind of, tries to hit on her, and she doesn't do anything, and now he's dead. Okay? They meet, for lack of a better word, the Ferenc, chapter 5. The dog explains what it is. But he says, that thing couldn't have killed all these people. It's a scavenger. He says something else was here. Twin things. And then he says, Liriel says, Hedge was here. What are the twin things? Where have we seen these twin beings? When Clore gets tricked by Hedge, remember in the previous book, I think it's in the prologue, Clore comes up, there's Hedge. Hedge tells her what he wants her to do. She says, okay, but if I'm not back, these two will take care of you. And he's like, yes, my lady, yeah, right. And she goes off to find what it is she thinks she's looking for, and she comes back, and what has happened to her? She's been taken over by Uranus at that point, because there is something in that buried, okay? Well, these are the two beings that have been allegiant to her. We find out how in that sequel previous book kind of thing. And this is what the dog is saying. It's these beings that killed all these people, okay? We're going to skip a bunch. They see the rain clouds off in the distance. Sam kind of thinks, let's make for Robles-town. She says, no, we can't. We don't have time. And they see the lightning off in the distance. This is before the break-in, hopefully it's in your two, The break in the chapter with the little star, about a page and a half before that. The dog says, there's too much lightning. It confirms a fear I had hoped to lay to rest. I had not thought they would find it so quickly or that it could be so easily entombed. I should have known. Ascarael does not lightly tread the earth, and a ferret released already. Lyriel, what is it? The thing hedges digging up. I will tell you more when needs must. That is, when the time is right, I'll tell you more. I do not wish to fill your bones with fear or tell ancient tales for no purpose. I'm not going to tell you what I think until I have more evidence and I'm more sure that I am right. There are still several possible explanations and ancient safeguards that might hold even if the worst is true. Okay? So, they go on. There's another, just about, 3 or 4 pages before the end of the chapter. They decide, I know it's 9:25, they're going to call forth rain. Why? It'll stop the dead from eating, it'll follow them and such. But Sam says, let's try this a little differently. Let's have you do this spell, and I'll do this spell. And we're told it's complementary magic. Notice what Sam is doing there. Okay? So Sam explains, and we're told, middle of that paragraph, about 3 pages before the end of the chapter, what Sam wanted to do was whistle different but complementary marks, in effect weaving together 2 different weather-working spells. Meaning he's what? He's creating. He's making a new spell, one that hasn't been said before. Lyriel, will it work? Sam, well, yeah, it'll be a lot stronger. In fact, how strong is it? We're told it rains for days and days. And just before that chapter ends, and we'll stop here, we see a league or more downstream of the shepherd's hut, a very short man, almost a dwarf, appears. Okay? And he's got a bell, but not around his neck, on the sash around his waist. He looks like a monk. And the bell rings a little bit, and the dwarf says, no, sister, I have work to do, you see. I cannot sleep now, not now. There are miles to go. I must make the most of 2 legs and hands while I still have them. We don't know yet who that is, but we find out very quickly. Okay, so for tomorrow, let's see what I wanted to do. I wanted to get through, so I think it's about 170. Tomorrow we need to get through about 3, Tuesday. Need to get through about 357. I think that's right. 170. Yeah. Yes, through chapter 17. Okay? And then we'll do the last bit the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, because we are drawing quickly to a close.